when we sing Christmas carols about Emmanuel, about God with us. That's what Emmanuel means. I think of a story told to me by a fellow Lutheran pastor that I served with in San Francisco many years ago. Kurt Adelsberger was a pastor at St. Matthew Lutheran Church, just a couple of miles from my church at St. John's. And we were gathering together, sort of a pastor's gathering at Christmas time, and he told us a story about a moment in his life when very vividly he had an experience of Emmanuel, God with him. Kurt was born in Germany. He was born in Germany during the years leading up to World War II. And at the end of the war, at the end of World War II, he was 9 years old and he was without family and without a home. His parents and his brothers and sisters had all been killed during the war. His home had been bombed down to the ground. In fact, most of the village that he was from was gone. So he had no money and no food. And he was on his own. For some months, he survived by walking from village to village and begging for food and then sleeping out in the field behind the houses at night. But after a short time, food was so scarce for everybody. There was such hardship that parents didn't even have food to feed their own children, let alone for an unknown boy just sort of wandering through the village. And so he began to go completely hungry at that point. It got worse because winter came and the weather became bitterly cold. So he very distinctly remembers that one night when he found his way into an abandoned railroad station, a waiting room of a train station. There was no one else in there, but at least it was out of the wind. He sat down on one of the benches there, and he knew that he was going to die that night. He hadn't eaten for about 5 days. He could barely walk anymore. There were just no resources. He decided the best he could do would be to just curl up on the bench in the waiting room and fall asleep, and that would be it. Well, he did curl up on the bench, and he did fall asleep. But just about that same time, 2 soldiers came into the waiting room, 2 American soldiers. They were part of a unit that was monitoring that part of Germany that the American forces had taken over at the end of the war. And they saw this little thin boy laying on the bench, and they gently woke him up and got him to sit up. And they could see just how famished he was. And so they started pulling food out of their army jackets. They started pulling out a chunk of bread, and they had a little piece of chocolate, and one of them had some cut up salami, and they started feeding Kurt at this time. And one of the soldiers also could speak some German, so they asked Kurt what was going on. Where was he going? Who did he belong to? He said, I don't belong to anybody, and I have nowhere to go. And so they said, well, we're not going to leave you just sitting here. We're going to take you someplace safer than this. So they bundled him up and put him into their Jeep that they had, and they drove about 30 miles away to a refugee camp. And they took him into the refugee camp, and they made sure that the staff at the refugee camp knew that he needed help and that he would get signed up for the program. And the refugee camp put him in a particular division of that camp that was completely orphan children. They were all orphan children who had no parents at the end of the war. Kurt was there for about 2 months. And then one day, he and a group of 50 orphan kids in this camp were put on a train and taken to the coast and put on a boat and sent to Canada and put on another train that took them to the middle of Saskatchewan to a Lutheran orphanage in the middle of Saskatchewan. And he lived there about 6 months. He was adopted by a family that fed him, that clothed him, that brought him to school. They were German Lutherans, so they could speak to him. They put him through college. He went to seminary and became a Lutheran pastor. He said, when I think back about that, those soldiers walking into the room were my experience of Emmanuel, God with me. They did more than just help me to survive physically. They brought my soul back to life. I had been walking for months, feeling completely alone. I didn't know who to turn to. There didn't seem like there was anybody in the world who knew that I was. And I prayed each day to God, but I wondered where God was. I just felt so alone. Does God even know about me? Does God know my story? And when they came walking into the room and cared about me, that was the Word made flesh. I felt like it was Jesus walking into the room who cared about me and knew what my needs are, and they held me tight. that God also was holding me tight. And I have never forgotten that moment for the rest of my life. I would guess that some of us here tonight are also hoping that we might experience a sense of Emmanuel, of God with us. I'm sure that we come here for many good reasons tonight. We come to sing the carols tonight. We come to light the candles and to see the beauty of the church as all the candles are lit. We come to be with family and to enjoy time with family. Those are all good things. But I think perhaps underneath all of that, many of us might also be hoping that perhaps tonight we have some sense of the presence of God with us, and God caring about us, and God is part of our life. That may not be too easy for us to do tonight, because if we come here hoping to feel God's presence, the problem is perhaps we're feeling so many other things tonight that could get in the way of it. I'm thinking, first of all, that ever since last Thanksgiving Day at about 6 p.m. at night when the stores opened up once again, we've been in the midst of this crazy Christmas buying, Christmas advertising, and rushing around from place to place in crowded stores, and feeling anxious to get just the right gift to just make our family happy. We also want to keep the American economy alive. We want to buy a lot of things. We've been so caught up in that with good hopes of having the perfect Christmas, but we've been on the go constantly that perhaps as we're sitting here tonight, what we're mostly feeling is still the buzzing, all of that, the pressure from all of that, and our bodies are still vibrating with that. Or some of us perhaps are sitting here just exhausted from all of that and the rest of life, just exhausted, just empty. Or some of us may be sitting here feeling just sort of irritated at the whole Christmas thing with just so much work this year that we'd rather be in Hawaii in the sunshine or something like that. So that's the challenge for us tonight, is that we sit here tonight and we're filled with so many different kinds of feelings. Yet the invitation tonight is to know that Christ is present among us. Christ is being born within us. Christ is even with us now, helping us to be alive again. And so we're invited to let go of that, to be set free of that, and to experience the birth of Christ in our midst. What we also struggle with, though, is not just the feelings, the emotions of the season, but the world we live in. We live in a complicated world. We live in a complicated and often indifferent world. There are 5 billion people on our planet, each with their own story. And so the question comes up, does God know about my story? There are 5 billion people. We live in a universe that is hundreds of millions of light years in length and width. And we might ask ourselves, well, where is God in all of that? I want to think that God is close, but where exactly is God in all of that? And then we also are in a world that has such tragedy at times. I think as we sit here, we perhaps feel all of the sadness and all of the sorrow of those who died over the last 2 weeks, the children in Connecticut and acquaintances in Oregon. And so we sit here tonight wanting to experience the presence of God, and yet we might be asking ourselves, well, then where is God? Does God know me? Does God care about me? In the gospel lesson from Luke that we'll hear in just a moment, the angels come to the shepherds on the hills around Bethlehem, and the lead angel says to the shepherds, do not be afraid. God knows about the fears that we all have, the questions we all have, and so the very first words of the angels are, do not be afraid. I bring good news of great joy for all people. For all people. Not just a few select people, not just very religious people, but for all of us, no matter where we're at tonight, no matter where we're at in our life journey. The angel says, I bring news of great joy for all people, for to you this night, in the city of David,